Good morning and welcome to the Investment Migration Report.
Today we have two special guests with the American Immigrant Investor Alliance, Shawn Gehani and Ishaan Khanna. Thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So I think one of the most important questions a lot of our listeners wanted to ask is what prompted you to start an Investors Alliance, and how did that go about?
So Abteen, Preeya, thanks for having us. You'd be surprised that EB5 investors have been advocating, have been actively sort of following the space, pre and post their investments in an informal manner for a number of years now. What we found, however, was these clusters of sort of informal and organized groups of investors. What they really needed was some sort of guidance and also a platform, as some of the issues facing the industry as well as those that face us investors directly have become increasingly more complex. This thought of setting up the alliance really came about from the needs that these investors had about having a seat at the table with respect to the conversations that are happening that directly affect us. And ultimately, what we really wanted to do was to create an organization that can help improve the quality of the immigration and investment experience that investors go through. There was no consistent quality of this experience that investors went. A lot of them relied on their service providers. A lot of them do rely on their regional centers. And we recognize all those players, obviously. We wouldn't be here if those players weren't there. But what we try and do is really sort of provide, from cradle to grave, services to investors to really sort of guide them throughout the process, which can be quite taxing, as you know.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, to be clear, this is the full name of your organization is the American Immigrant Investors Alliance, right?
That's
AIIA.
Yes.
Or the Alliance, as you call it as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about who the founding members of the organization are and who's currently on your board?
Right. So, two of the founding members are right here with you, myself and Ishaan. And then we have a couple of others as well. And we're all from diverse backgrounds. I myself am a Canadian citizen. I'm based out of Toronto. We have another founding member who's actually of Australian descent. We've got another founding member who's a student at Harvard right now. So we have different things that we bring to the table, and we're all very diverse from where we came from. It's the way that we sort of came together was really based on our combined vision about what we wanted out of this, rather than anything else.
At TIMR, we try to be agnostic, and we want to just cover different areas that investors are interested in. But I personally just think, in the EB5 space in the last 30 years, there's been a lot of stakeholders, but not a lot of attention has been paid to the actual investors, to the actual families who are impacted by this, to the actual investors. And I was, rough estimate, I would think somewhere between 100,000 and 200,000, immigrant investors have come to the United States in the last 30 years. And I applaud you for starting this organization. I wish there were more organizations of the sort. And I bet, depending on what country you originate from or what, where your wants are, there may be different wants and needs and different issues that are important to different investors. But we applaud you, and we're excited to hear your point of view on issues that really affect investors, and other people haven't really shared a microphone or shared a voice with the investors for them to express their point of view.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, a lot of my investors as well, they're part of sort of like piecemeal organizations here and there, maybe a group on WeChat or other groups where they're getting information. But I think it's definitely important for the investors to have a voice, a collective voice, and also to have somewhere where they can get accurate information from, because obviously when they're hearing information from all different places, there's a lot of misinformation that goes around. So I think that's important as well. So I agree with Abteen. I applaud you guys for starting this organization. I think it's a great idea. Can you tell us a little bit more about what your priorities are at this time? Because there's so much going on in the EB5 industry. So it's actually a really poignant time for you guys to have started. You came about with the group back in April 2021, right? So it's definitely been a busy time since then in EB5. What are some of your priorities at the moment when it comes to things like reauthorization of the program, or, for example, the status of individuals who are currently waiting for their I-526s to be approved?
So, great question. So, I think going back to why we founded the organization, we founded in April because the founding members essentially sort of foresaw this situation coming about. The reauthorization issue, we saw that the current Grassy Leahy bill had issues, and investors' voice was lost in that. And we did not have any representation when it came to the actual legislative process. So the biggest priority for us right now, of course, is reauthorization. We want the program to be authorized. We believe that investors who have invested in good faith, who submitted their applications at the time when a law was active, should be processed fairly. We think it's not a good thing that the disagreements between the industry causes all applications to be stalled. So one of the major pushes that we've done now since we've been active is grandfathering investor applications, meaning that in case of a lapse, in case of this lapse or future lapses, investors' application processing would not be stopped. And we think that's the biggest thing that's our biggest priority right now with for existing investors in the process wherever they are. Now, as far as those who are waiting for their pending 526s, 485s, etc., it's the same. We want the applications to be processed. We speak with investors almost every day, people who are unable to go to school, folks who are unable to join their families in the US, and they're all stuck because they all expected investment and immigration timeline, and that is not being followed. People put their lives on the line, and people put a lot of their money, hard-earned money, on the line too. And for them to be made to wait longer than they were initially told is disappointing, and we want to fix that. Now, as far as the future of the EB5 program, after we deal with reauthorization, we'd like to tackle things like processing times, maybe create a liaison with USCIS, DOS, DHS, and be able to push for more transparency with those organizations. We are consumers of the program. We have paid these organizations fees in order for our applications to be processed and move forward. And when, as a consumer, when we don't get the transparency that we need from these organizations, it hurts us. And as AIIA, we want to fix that. The American Immigrant Investor Alliance wants to advocate on behalf of all investors, regardless of their country of birth, regardless of where they are in the process. Once you've submitted a 526, we wish to represent everyone who's crossed that threshold.
And Ishaan, from an investor's perspective, I know USCIS is an organization where all of their budget comes from fees that they charge from immigrant investors, people like you. And in the past, I mean, I know I've been in the industry almost 10 years. In 2011, 2012, these filing fees were negligible. I mean, they were very small. They were, I believe, less than $100. And USCIS brought the idea of premium processing, and basically everything became premium processing. Now the fees have crept up to $2,700, $3,700 for I-924 application, just to change a regional center to $17,000 filing fee. All of this was supposed to be done to generate new revenue for the USCIS, so the USCIS could hire more people and these wait times could come down. But the exact opposite has happened. I just feel like when you file an application, it goes into a black hole and you don't hear anything from the USCIS in 24 months at the least. And if the USCIS was a Fortune 500 company, we'd bankrupt. If it's any other government or agency that it had to answer to stakeholders, it would be in hot water. But for some reason, the USCIS operates and keeps raising its fees. And if I was an investor in your shoe, I'd be irate because those fees were supposed to be used to generate resources to hire more people to bring those wait times down. I'd love to hear your point of view in that regard, and what you think. Are the filing fees correct? Are they too high? Why are you not getting the service that you're paying for? And where are those resources going?
Yeah, it's a good point. And the thing is, I think what a lot of Americans forget is that this country was founded on immigration. The immigrants is what makes this country great. And when your immigration system is so deeply flawed, it really puts a stain on this country. And so, with regards to processing fees and filing fees, I would hope that going forward, we can fix that. We can advocate for better processing times, more transparency as to what's happening with our applications. I personally, I'm not against what the filing fees and the processing fees are. I mean, I get it. It's a tough business. Adjudicators are paid what they're paid, and they deserve to be. Uh, but I would hope that perhaps once we create a liaison with them, once we can advocate for investors much more formally, we can ask for things like premium processing for I-526 applications. I think there are plenty of investors out there who would be happy to pay a higher fee if they knew that their application would be processed in 3 months, 6 months, just a fixed time frame. Many immigrant investors, I mean, they put in a lot of money with the hope that they can bring them and their families to the US at a certain time. Most immigration by investment programs have a sort of timeline, a reliable timeline that immigrants can look forward to. And it's disappointing that the greatest country on this planet can't keep that up. So I again, I'm not against the current fees. I think they're fine. If that's what they're charging us, we're happy to pay it. But in return, USCIS must be transparent with immigrants as to where their application is, and this should be throughout the board. It shouldn't just be with EB5. I would say even with applications such as asylum cases, there should be transparency as to where those people are in line. How long is it going to take? When is the application up for renewal processing? All of that stuff should be made transparent.
I think that's true. I think that would make a lot of our jobs more easier as well. Just having more transparency and being able to answer questions for investors, because just as much as investors don't know the answers, we have no way of finding out. And you send inquiries to USCIS or NVC, and you don't really get responses, or you get very vague responses. So it's often very frustrating for the investors, as well as for people like me who are consultants and attorneys who are trying to help investors as well. Since you've been active, what are some of the issues you've tackled so far, and what have you been able to achieve?
Yeah, I can take that, Preeya. Yeah, so true to our sort of DNA, some of our initial events in terms of achievements were, we just wanted to get online with the investor community that's behind us. We've been busy doing town halls almost on a weekly basis for different communities, different time zones. It's quite hectic. There never seems to be, as you would know in this world, a time that really works for every time zone or most time zones. So it's been hectic activity, as far as that is concerned. In addition to that, so just from getting our word out there, and really our sort of focus right now is to have as many investors know about us as possible. So obviously a lot of effort has gone in that regard. Now, in terms of actual tangible deliverables that investors do care about, one of the things that Ishaan alluded to earlier, which we have taken up quite seriously, is the idea of grandfathering of the investor applications. And what we really see that effort as is really a technical fix in the way that existing legislation is written. I don't think it was ever the intention that when these people apply that future laws would be retroactively applicable to investors. So really our sort of approach to this grandfathering is that the rules, the laws, and the regulations that were in place at the time that these investors filed their applications should apply throughout their investment and immigration timelines. So really what we're looking for is a safe passage for investors, regardless of the status of the regional center program. And we've taken that a step further. We're not just talking about that in concept. We have actually got a piece of legislation drafted, which is known as the Foreign Investor Fairness Protection Act, that we hope that becomes law one day. So we're actively pushing for that with members of Congress, members of Senate. And really that sort of segues us into how do we get our job done. What we have been busy doing, and our specific strategy, at least at this point in time, is really to educate the members of Congress about the program. You would be surprised how little education is about this program specifically, and how it sort of gets lost in the weeds of just immigration at large, or even employment-based immigration. at large. And what we're trying to do is change the perception of the program. So we run a campaign that's known as Faces Behind EB5. And what that campaign focuses on is the individual investors and the families that are behind this process, really the investors that form the bedrock of the industry. And that is a perspective that is new. That is a perspective that we hope changes the perception, within the House and within the Senate of what this program is and what good it does, to the country. It's a mutually beneficial program, as it was always intended to be, but somewhere that's been lost, and we sort of want to reinvigorate that. So that's been, these are the things that have been keeping us busy. Among other things, I just did want to highlight that, AIIA in one of their blogs, and we're actively discussing our issues with all industry folks, AIUSA and others. But AIUSA did recognize us as an investor voice. So there's a blog that they released. Ishaan might know the name because it's an industry blog. I forget the name. And then other than that, the EB5 Investor Magazine also covered us. So these are just sort of a couple of, I guess, media maybe events that happen, which we don't focus a whole ton on media, but it is definitely nice when we do get acknowledged and recognized.
And that Investor Protection Act, I just have an update for the investors. I believe Robert Devine and Karen Lee were instrumental in writing that. And in the past, I think the most important thing for all of us was a reauthorization. But right now, I think that's actually even more important, a reauthorization, to make sure that these existing investors that have done everything that U.S. Congress has asked them, which is generate jobs, bring economic activity, do their applications, follow all the rules, and they could potentially still be at risk. So the most important thing right now is to make sure the existing investors are covered and grandfathered. And I did hear that the other side of the aisle, and when I say the other side of the aisle, not Republican, Democrat, but the group that was against this bill, has also reviewed that as an agreement. So hopefully there's something will happen soon. I heard that as of last Thursday. One of the most important things I think for investors to really hear, I think there's lots of negative articles about EB5, and you hear all these things in the press that falsely identify EB5 as a cash for visa program, not understanding that all the jobs that you have to be created and all of the work that has to be done in the background to make sure these projects qualify, bring in economic activity to well-needed areas in the United States. And I think a lot of people that don't understand the EB5 program, they just assume that it's some oligarch that's writing a $900,000 check, and they're multi-billionaires in their yacht, and they're doing this EB5 investment. But we're Preeya and I are on the forefront. We're talking to investors now. Granted, there are investors that are very high net worth, but the average investor is the working middle class family that just wants a better life for their family. Some people are getting loans to do this. And that was one of the reasons I actually didn't like the $900,000 program, even though the U.S. is a premium residency to all these other countries, should have a premium pricing. But it really kind of made it less affordable for our average middle class family and made it almost a millionaire program. But even so, even at 900,000, I think you hear a lot of stories, and that average investor is a middle class or upper middle class family just trying to bring their family to the United States. And I think it's important for our audience and especially members of Congress to hear what the typical investor is or looks like. Could you just share some light on that? I know you guys have a lot of members, and then maybe talk about how many members you currently have, and then maybe we can put out a plug where investors can go and sign up.
Sure. So our investors, really, just the DNA of this AIIA, the organization, is simply that we represent investors regardless of their country of origin or country of birth. So we have investors from, the obvious, top nations that currently subscribe to this program, namely, India, China, Vietnam. But then also all the others that you would think of. We have investors who, and very actively participate from Singapore, from Hong Kong, from Australia, from Canada, like myself, New Zealand. So we really have, a fairly diverse set of investors that are, members of this organization. And in terms of memberships, it may be something we'll talk about later on in this show here. But we are working on some membership, program specific to those that could be tailored to, like I said, the full life cycle of the investor journey. So we're sort of in the early innings of developing something. Right now, our focus is obviously what's in front of us right now in terms of reauthorization. But once the dust settles on that, we do look to come out with a comprehensive membership program. But yeah, so going back to your question, yeah, no, the people that are behind, EB5 are obviously from a country of origin perspective, they're quite diverse. But those that are in the United States, these are tax-paying people, tax-paying residents of the United States. A lot of them work in the medical profession, the COVID frontlines. We have members who are interventional cardiologists. We have members who are doing research on pharmaceuticals as it relates to COVID. We have obviously a lot of folks that are from the tech community. So it is quite broad and diverse, even for those that are currently in the U.S. on different statuses.
And to add to that, a lot of those investors, especially the ones who are in the U.S., are the biggest and best advocates for us. When we get on calls with Senate staffers and members of Congress, what we do is we usually bring on some of these investors, especially investors who live in their districts of these respective Congress people, and we show them that, look, this is your future resident. This will be a citizen someday. He's going to be a donor. He's going to be a voter, and he's the kind of person who is affected by the program lapse. He is the kind of person who's affected by slow processing times. And this is your constituent. You should uphold your responsibility to them. And that is, I feel, it makes the biggest impact. It's one thing when an issuer or developer or someone approaches a congressperson, and that's great, and they can do that. But as an immigrant with our individual stories, I feel like that is what makes the biggest and best impact when it comes to actual advocacy of this of EB5, and helps change the perception that this isn't just a cash for visa scheme for ultra wealthy immigrants. These are folks who work hard, who love this country, who want to do good for it, who've invested $500,000 with the hope that it would benefit the U.S. economy and benefit their families. So that is the point that we try to get across when we do our advocacy work.
And to add to that, when they call this cash for visa or cash for citizenship, it really makes me irate because St. Kitts has a program that's cash for green card, or you mail them a check and they'll mail you back a passport. And the U.S. program is the exact opposite of that. I mean, you have to create jobs. It's an economic development tool, and it's to create jobs for low-income areas. And I don't think people really understand the ins and outs of all the documentation, all the work, and all the preparation that goes through to make sure that this is exactly what it's intended. And it's the exact opposite of cash for visa program, because you send the cash and you do all of the job creation, all the requirements. You don't even hear back for 2 years. So how is that a cash for a visa program if you can't even hear back from the agency that you're working with for 2 years? And just I like to clear up a lot of those misconceptions. I know, Preeya, you had a question, so I'll yield back to you.
Yeah, I know you guys were saying that you obviously have members from all over the globe, from every nationality. And I was just wondering, how do you sort of deal with the different needs of investors depending on what nationality they're from or what country they're from? Because I'm sure there are different needs and wants for individuals or investors from different countries. So how do you sort of align those? For example, removing the visa cap, for example.
Sure. What you're referring to is country cap removal.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. And I will start by stating our guiding principle when we do any kind of advocacy work or when we're advocating for anything. We are against any proposals that would lengthen the investment or immigration timeline for any investor already in line. So that means that if you're advocating for a certain proposal which benefits a certain class of investors while hurts others, we are against that. That is our issue with the one big issue, which is country cap removal, which a certain EB5 investor community is pushing for. And here's the thing: we understand why they're pushing for it. We understand their pain. We understand the long backlogs that community is facing. And the truth is that we're against it because it would negatively impact those who are already in line, those who already made a decision and made calculations for their children, for their families, that they would be able to get a green card for that reason. And to add to that, I'll give an example. A lot of a lot of the big consumers of EB5 are in the last few years are Indian immigrants who've been stuck in the EB2, EB3 backlog. Many of them did EB5 because they saw on the visa bulletin that it was current for India, and they did it for that reason. Now, to suddenly have to wait longer now that they've already invested seems extremely unfair, given that they're already in another visa backlog to begin with. So, for that reason, we're against any proposal that affects existing investors in line. But that said, we do want to work with all communities to find some kind of middle ground to help alleviate the immigration backlog. Whether it's advocating for more visa numbers, whether it's advocating for EAD and work permits after the I-526 approval, we're open to whatever solutions that are workable, that can be proposed, that are non-controversial, and can be brought forward to members of Congress. So we look forward to engaging with different investor communities over these next few months, and hopefully, as reauthorization is taken care of, we can advocate for those issues together jointly.
And to clarify, for those investors that are mainly mainland China investors who, currently have, I forget what the backlog date is, but it's somewhere between 10 and 15. Yeah, 10 and 15 years. And to be fair to them, they also were current, and they didn't know they were going to have a backlog, or when they signed up, they may have had a 1 or 2 year backlog, and then they ended up at 15. So I understand where their frustration comes from. They also have a right to be frustrated. But I agree with you. I mean, if you remove the per country caps, if China has a 15-year backlog, their backlog goes down to 14 years. But every other country that doesn't have a backlog, their wait times go from, going through the whole program in 5 years to now they're having a 12 to 14-year backlog. So it essentially saves the mainland Chinese investors very little time, and it costs every other country an extra 10 years. So it just doesn't really help anybody.
Yeah, and Abteen, just to sort of follow up on the idea of the Chinese investors, it seems too simplistic to sort of bundle them all under one class of investors. We have done outreach with a number of them. We've had town halls, and we're trying to get as close to close to them as possible, in the sense that there's obviously technological barriers and whatnot to be able to reach them. But what we have found is that even within the very large and big and diverse community of single country based investors, there's diverse viewpoints. There's people who would absolutely appreciate a program that would rather be a more transparent program, that where they can access a set of facts that are available to everybody. So to think that every single one investor in China has a certain viewpoint, we found the opposite to be the case. Some of the earlier priority dates in China, they're not as affected by the current retrogression. They want to see a program that works for everybody. So we're, just to kind of back up Ishaan's point, we're looking for middle ground with which all of us can coexist, and we feel that a lot of our sort of asks are just based on common law and reasonableness, and wherever we're encountered with issues that sort of sidetrack us from those guiding principles, those are the ones we put in the parking lot, because there's just enough work to be done just on the common ground issues to begin with.
Agreed. And so Shawn and Ishaan, I know you've done a lot of outreach programs. More recently, you guys spent some time with in Senator Durbin's office. Can you give us some updates on some of the outreach programs and what conversations you've had with Senate staff and helping move this bill or a version of this program forward?
Sure. So we've had a number of calls with key members of the Senate, including members of the crucial Senate judiciary community. We try to convey investor concerns, the effect of the regional center program lapse to those Senate staffers. We've had calls with staff members from Senator Chuck Grassley, Alex Padilla, Pat Toomey, Dick Durbin. And the general themes of these conversations, from what we try to obviously do our own sort of fact finding from them. We try to gain information from them, and then we obviously get into our conversations. But what we've learned, and this is kind of, I don't mean to call out the industry here, but I've heard a lot about from various members of the industry about how Congress looks favorably upon this program and things like that. And to be honest, I haven't really found that. What we have found is that many of these Senate members and their staffers aren't really even aware of EB5. And if so, they get most of their perception from the media, which generally doesn't carry a very favorable view of this program. They have little to no knowledge about the actual consumers of the program. They aren't necessarily aware about who are the people who use it currently and are benefiting from this immigration by investment program. So most of our calls, we start by truly by educating these members about EB5, the main consumers, who are the people who have been investing for the last 4 or 5 years and benefiting from the program, what kind of projects they invest in. I, for example, invested in a hotel in Puerto Rico. And once the project is complete and the hotel is up and running, that island, which relies so much on tourism, will no doubt benefit from that my investment. And so highlighting stuff like that is really what we try to do when we get on these calls. Along with that, we usually try to, like I think I mentioned this earlier, which is we try to bring on an investor who lives in their district, or an investor who has invested in a project in their district and is able to highlight how they themselves have contributed so much to the local economy even before the EB5 investment, and now how their investment is currently benefiting that state. For example, on our last call with Senator Toomey, who's a Republican senator from Pennsylvania, we had a gastroenterologist, a doctor who was him and his wife were COVID frontline workers, and he highlighted how he had spent almost 10 years in this country, getting his medical degree, building him and his family a home, sending his kids to school in the great state of Pennsylvania, and highlighting how once he was unable to get his green card through the normal route, decided to do EB5, and has now since then, who he invested in, I think 2018, 2019, has been waiting since then to get his green card, and showing how and I think though that's where we're truly effective, is we highlight personal stories, we show the human side of EB5. It's not just developers and issuers and attorneys involved in this. It's immigrants who want to contribute to this country, who want to do good, and are doing everything on good faith. And that is where I believe that the American Immigrant Investor Alliance is successful when it comes to their advocacy work. And when we talk and we get in front of senators and Senate staffers, we're able to highlight these stories to get our point across.
So a lot of the other organizations like AIIA or EB5IC, they've also obviously been having conversations with Congress members, Senate members. What are some of the points that your organization agrees with AIIA and EB5IC?
So that's a great question. So I think first and foremost, we have an agreement when it comes to long-term reauthorization. We and other members of EB5IC, AIUSA, all agreed that having investors panic every few months, having all the entire industry panic every few months, whether or not this program would be reauthorized, is not something any of us want. We want a long-term stable program that investors can rely on and get their applications through. So there is an agreement when it comes to that. There's also an agreement on grandfathering of investors. Like we mentioned, the Foreign Investor Fairness Protection Act that we employ Robert Devine to help write is agreed upon by all parties. We are pushing this as a standalone bill when we get in front of Senate staffers, but we're also hoping that EB5IC and AIUSA will include that language in their bills whenever they have it published. I think in terms of what else we agree on, I think we all agree on shorter processing times and all of that. And I think we see more eye to eye on most of, if not all, issues than anything. Here's probably the one or two points that we may disagree on, and that it simply comes back to the guiding principle that I mentioned earlier. We oppose any policies that would lengthen the immigration or investment timeline of investors. So take, for example, a proposal like visa set aside. That phrase by itself, visa set aside, setting aside a visa that was supposed to be issued to an investor, setting it aside for someone who has invested in a specific project or specific TEA, I don't feel is fair. We believe that investors should be processed. Anyone who's invested already in line should be processed according to the laws and statute that exists. But to take away a visa that is supposed to go to someone and give it to somebody else, we think is extremely unfair. So proposals like that we're against. But other than that, I think most of us groups, we all agree on almost, I guess, 90% of the current issues that face EB5 investors today.
And I think you're right. The one thing you said, which is so true, is that, it's come to the point where investors have to really, they're nervous about their investments, and they really have to think twice, and they're getting worried every few months as to what is going to happen with this program, because there's been so many things that have been up in the air over the past couple of years. And I've never seen so much skepticism with the program as I have nowadays. And rightfully so, because there's just so much going on, and there's so much uncertainty that investors don't know which way to look when it comes to thinking about investing in the EB5 program. So is there any sort of advice that you can give investors or potential EB5 investors when it comes to investing in the regional center program? Do you think after reauthorization, is this still going to be a good idea? And do you have any general advice when it comes to the EB5 program and becoming an investor?
Sure. Both Shawn and I, EB5 investors ourselves, and we understand the needs and wants of these immigrant investors as they come through the process. So once this EB5 Regional Center program is reauthorized, and I hope that it's reauthorized without anything unfavorable, uh, then I would recommend to investors that they truly do their due diligence. Um, the best kind of research that I tell investors that they should do is to do it themselves. I understand that there's a lot of advisors and third party folks out there that exist to help advise and sort of help you through the process. But I do believe every investor should do their own due diligence when engaging on this. And there's two types of due diligence you want to do. You want to do an immigration due diligence, meaning you want to understand the possible timelines, the possible delays you may face as you go through this process. You must understand your source of funds. You must understand where your money is coming from and if it is okay. Um, there's a proposal that was there in the previous Grassi-Leahy bill, which I'm vehemently against, which is the lack of judicial review. What that would entail is if an investor received a denial on their I-526, rather than being able to use the American court system and appealing that denial, they would have to be forced to go through the Office of Administrative Appeals. And that is a black hole by itself. And those over there appeals can take years to be resolved. And I have an investor recently who received an unfavorable opinion from USCIS because of cryptocurrency usage in his I-526. And I imagine if that investor didn't, if this law existed, then this investor would not be able to appeal the denial of their case. And that I think is important. So as long as we don't have things like that, negative things like that in the future of the EB5 Regional Center program, I would expect investors to be okay. But if something like that did exist, I would hope the investors do everything they can to ensure that their source of funds and their application would be solid. Now let's talk about investment due diligence. Uh, I think it's important investors do their homework when they look at where to invest. I think they should do a thorough analysis as to the project, where the money is going into. And I'm going to be a stickler for this. And I know probably some investors may not like hearing this, but read your PPM. Read every project, every EB5 investment offering has to give you a private placement memorandum. It is extremely important, and it's long. It's a 1,000-page document. But I do advise that every prospective investor read and understand the PPM before they make the investment. It's something I do too. I mean, I actually wrote an article about this in EB5 Investor magazine about the critical things that investors should look for in their PPM. But I just think it's important for investor to go through, understand the terms and conditions of the investment, understand when they would be repaid, how they would be repaid. If it's a debt investment, if it's a debt EB5 project, then understand what is your loan secured over. Understand the asset. Look at how much the asset was purchased for initially. How much money has been spent on construction. Those are little things which I do believe an investor should look at, and even after they do the investment, should continue to monitor as time goes on. So that's my I guess 2 cents as far as investors looking into the process.
Ishaan, my suggestion would be if there is a PPM that's 1,000 pages long, then you should skip that project too. I'm just kidding.
Go for one with 800 pages.
Yeah. No, I think it's very important that what you mentioned. I think a lot of investors, especially investors in India, I've traveled to India many times. They get this false sense that just because someone is an immigration attorney that they can be qualified to give them investment advice. And I think it's really important what you mentioned, that you split up those two functions. There's the immigration side. How safe is this project from an immigration perspective? Is the TEA safe? Is the job creation safe? Or all the things that are matter or how a business plan require for the USCIS in order for this project to get approved. That type of advice you can get from an immigration attorney. But then, investment advice, that's a completely different category. And I applaud you for you doing your homework. I mean, you can hire third-party due diligence firms that may get expensive, but I think investors should either talk to other investors or do their own homework on the the quality of the project and what type of project it is. One of the things I suggest, and I think every investor should do their own due diligence or really talk to people that know real estate, especially in real estate projects. But one thing I think it's really important: projects that require either sell of the project or revenues in order to pay the investors back are generally going to be tougher. And I think institutional quality, in the United States, certain asset classes are institutional quality, which means banks finance them, which means there's a market to refinance. Those are, hotels, multifamily, apartments, condos. Typically, they have to rely on sales of those condos. If the market's great, they sell them and pay you back. If it's not, you may be stuck. But mixed use, retail, office, those are all assets that are institutional quality assets. But there's been projects where a big giant ski resort that costs $1 billion. Well, who's going to refinance that? There's not really a market to refinance ski resorts, so that becomes complicated. But I agree with you. I think investors should do due diligence and not really rely on immigration attorneys to make investment advice. They should rely on immigration attorneys for their immigration advice, and I think that's an important point. Ishaan, I know the part of the bill that you didn't really like, and I agree with you. I actually don't like that due process is taken away from investors. But I think one of the things that investors and a lot of the stakeholders fail to realize, we all want what we want. Everyone has different requirements. In a perfect world, we would get a perfect bill. But sometimes in politics, you have to take a poison pill and get the bill to moving forward. And in a lot of stakeholders' eyes, I think that was a fair thing to take in order to get the reauthorization. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. So now we're back to the drawing boards. Maybe if you could spend a minute talking about just the different organizations out there and what are just the recent happenings that you've been hearing about the potential of the AB5 regional center program.
Sure. Well, I mean, as of right now, which is now we're 26 days into the EB5 program lapse, I think generally the tone from investors is slowly going from disappointment to anger. I think all groups are kind of feeling the pressure when it comes to this. I know there's efforts being made in terms of attempts to get this program reauthorized or perhaps even a short-term extension. But it's way to be seen. I mean, the hope is, I know one group is trying to push for the reauthorization to be included in the upcoming infrastructure bill or the reconciliation bill, but it's yet to be seen. We're approaching 30 days of the program lapse. I can't imagine what it's going to be like once we hit day 40, day 60, as the international media and other members begin to pick up on this and the negative effect the lapse is having on these immigrants. I can imagine that it's going to hit a boiling point at some point or the other. And what we're hearing so far is that it most likely appears that the program will be reauthorized at the end of September, which is quite a long time away. And while I applaud the groups, the industry groups, for trying whatever they can, we're still going to keep pushing our bill, which is the Foreign Investor Protection Act, and the hope is that somehow or the other one of us groups will be successful. I do hope that we can reach a point where we're all working and communicating with each other regularly. We aren't there yet, but that is the hope, that all of us groups can work together to get this program back and coordinate this effort in a positive fashion. With that, I'll also mention to investors who are stuck in this process and who are feeling helpless about all of this, reach out to us. Our website, goaiia.org. That's goaiia.org. Find us, sign up for our advocacy form, send us your information, sign up for our newsletter, check out our blog posts. There's ways to get involved in advocacy efforts. There's ways to sort of help bring this program back to protect existing investors in line. So if I'm sure if we all work together, from the industry groups, from the lawyers, everyone, there's a path forward. Over the last week, we've been approached by some foreign migration consultancies, some attorneys as well, who all want to get involved and help us out. So we're looking to partner up with all of these organizations and build a coalition that can help protect existing investors in line, because that's really our number one priority. We believe that this industry will prosper if current investors are taken care of. So the hope is that we can take care of them, we can get our reauthorization back, and get a program back, and get these investors along in the process.
Can I just talk about one thing? I don't know if you have an opinion on it or not, but there's also been some talk about there being, even though the program will be reauthorized by end of September, hopefully, that there might be another small window where they're allowing for investors to come in at 500,000 rather than an increased price again. Have you heard anything about that? And what is your opinion on that? I'm not sure if you have any investors in your group that invested at the $900,000 mark, but how have they been affected? And have you heard anything along the lines of there being another small window at 500?
Not entirely sure if we're gonna have a small window at 500. If we do get a short-term extension now over maybe the next week or two, or before Senate goes into vacation or their period or whatever. So before Senate goes into recess, there may be a small window when it opens up at $500,000, but it's hard to say whether that'll happen or not. With regards to investors who've already invested at $900,000, I think some of them would naturally feel disappointed that a product that they've invested in, it now costs half the amount. But unfortunately, there's not much that they can do about it. I imagine most projects have already deployed their money, so it's not like they could have refiled and maybe got a refund or something like that. But I think their biggest concern is that the fact that they've invested at this new investment amount after November 2019, and now their applications are stalled. I think that's what probably hurts them a lot more than knowing that, hey, the investment amount is back at 500. And with that said, I do expect the investment amount to rise again. And I actually think it should. Both Shawn and I invested at the $500,000 level, but I think it's completely fair for a country like the United States to raise their minimum investment threshold. Take Canada, for example. Their QIP, when it first released the Quebec Immigration Investment Program, I think started at 400,000 Canadian dollars. They raised it to 800, then to 1.2 million Canadian dollars. Every country has raised their golden visa programs with time, with inflation, and that's completely fair, as they should. And so for the US to have it at $500,000 since the 1990s and now want to raise it, I think that's perfectly fine. I hope whenever they do come about raising it, I mean, hopefully it's not at 900, maybe it's a little bit lower, but I think it's completely reasonable for the government to want to do so.
One thing I would add to that, we're hearing a lot of rumors out there, rumors that, the program was 500,000 and then it became 900,000. Now they're going to split the difference and the new program will be, 700 and 750,000. I think a lot of those people that are creating these rumors just don't really have a sense of reality. At the end of the day, there are things that we want, there are things that other stakeholders want. And, sometimes they pass these rumors and they become, people run wild with them. But at the end of the day, the senators, and there's reasons why the Senate is really the arena that the EB5 bill is getting built on and not in the House. And it's because, certain states that have more population are going to have more Congress members like New York, LA, or New York, California, Texas, and Florida. For that reason, all the battles have been, fought in the Senate. the New York gets 2 senators, and Idaho gets 2 senators, and Vermont gets 2 senators. And for those reasons, that's where all these battles have been fought. And those senators that are influential have shown very little interest to make this program a $500,000 program. In fact, back when Ted Kennedy was the big champion of this program back in the early 1990s, they always intended this program to be $1 million program. They put a set aside of 30% of the visas for TEAs. They didn't envision that the program was going to be all TEAs. They just thought that was going to be 30%. In fact, they put 30% of the visas aside for rural and TEAs, whether high unemployment or rural. And even in the latest discussions, Senator Graham, Senator Schumer, Senator Grassley, Senator Leahy, the big influential senators, basically wanted to make this a $1 million program. Even 900,000 was not enough when they were talking about permanent reauthorization. So there are definitely a lot of rumors out there about the $700,000 and other price limits. And I'm not saying those are impossible; they're not going to happen. But I think a lot of the people that are talking about those numbers are not really paying attention to what the members of Senate who are influential, who make these laws are interested in. And again, both sides of the coin is, if you make it $1 million program, it makes it less affordable, and you are making it $1 million program. But the other side of the coin is the senators that view this as that, hey, the United States residency should be a premium to Malta, for example, or to Cyprus and some of these countries that have anywhere from $500,000 to $1.5 million program, and the United States is a premium residency with the U.S. passport. You can basically travel anywhere in the world, and so I get both sides of the coin. But there are definitely a lot of rumors out there, but I don't think the people that are passing these rumors have any idea what the senators have in mind.
Exactly. And, I'll reflect on, I guess, our last call with Dick Durbin's office. And we specifically had a call with Wilson Osorio, who is the immigration counsel at Senator Durbin's office. And, Senator Durbin is a member of is actually the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and will no doubt play a big role when it comes to adding on an EB-5 reauthorization to the upcoming bills. And, Mr. Osorio was previously associate counsel at USCIS. He's quite familiar with how the agency works. And, when we sat down with him and we made him aware of the program lapse and the plight of existing investors, Mr. Osorio was actually quite sympathetic. And he was surprised that the program's lapse had a retroactive effect on existing investors. When we drafted the Foreign Investor Fairness Protection Act, we went with Robert Devine because he is the chairman of he was the chairman of the immigration division at he is the chairman of the immigration division at Baker Donaldson, and he was a former chief counsel and acting director of USCIS. He understands the agency as well. And Mr. Osorio's response after we walked with him and talked him through this entire call, he said, yeah, look, I'm committed to writing a report about the EB-5 program lapse and this bill, and he's going to run up the food chain. And we think that with efforts like this, we can help sort of bridge the gap between the senators and us, and so we can help educate these members of Congress on the lapse, on the impact of this program on individual investors, and hope that something good comes out of it.
So I think we've already talked about. Can you just go through again how, if an investor is wanting to become a part of your organization, what's the best way for them to do that? Who are making donations to you right now, and how are you using those donation dollars?
Yeah, I'll take that, Preeya. Good question. Yeah, look, ultimately, we're a member-funded organization. All of us at the board that run, the day-to-day, we don't get paid. We don't take any money out. All of the donations, we're purely putting in our time. Most of us, if all of us have, our 9-to-5 jobs, and this is really stuff that we're passionate about, that that we're putting in our effort on. In terms of donations, look, we're very transparent about how, the donation dollars are allocated, and I'll read out, the list of items that we, allocate these funds on. The first and foremost is we fund our political consultancy expenses through this, which is ultimately what gains us access to having some of these direct conversations that we talked about in this episode. We're spending on building earned media presence and funding some small marketing expenses. Although we believe in a lot of earned media. So we have our political consultancy that helps out with this. So that is perhaps one of our single largest expenses. Other than that, we have a slew of professional services expenses associated with all these legislative texts and proposals that we talked about. For a young organization like us, I'll say it was not easy to get some of the best in the profession from across the nation and commission the legislative text that we did, but it's something that we all believe in. We ultimately thought that once this is put out there, the investor community rather would really see the value. This is one thing. There's one thing that investors like from across the world, which is consistency of the rules with which they're forced to play. Nobody likes the rules of the game changing midway on them when certain expectations were built. And this is something that we advocate on as well, which is the fact that we believe that outside of the conversations about what amounts are appropriate as part of this program, the single largest thing that anybody could do is bring a level of stability to the program and remove all the uncertainty. So that is definitely hampering the activity in the industry. Outside of that, we fund a lot of legal services expenses that defend investor interests in key ongoing EB5 precedent building legal arguments. We have administrative expenses to carry out our 501c4 activities, and the website and overhead expenses, etc. Look, at the end of the day, we are a grassroots organization, so we have the philosophy of the 3 T's, which is you can either bring us your time, talent, or treasure, and we have people doing all 3 or doing one of the above, depending on their circumstances. It's definitely true that those who are already in the U.S. or at least on the continent, tend to have a greater role as it relates to, their time investment. But where the donations help us from across the globe is furthering all of these initiatives that we're working on. In the long term, what we hope this organization becomes is really a place where investors can call it home before they even, at least for those that are situated outside the U.S., they can call it home before they even call the United States their home. This is a place where we hope that investors come together and, have access to the most up-to-date current information, which is free from bias, free from misinformation. So that's something that we're striving on. We believe that once we, again, going back to the previous point we made, if the existing investors receive fair treatment, we believe that the industry thrives automatically. So it's sort of an intrinsic value system that we have where we consciously believe in serving the investor community. I'll just do a quick plug here. So yeah, definitely go to our website, goaiia.org. If you go to the Take Action page, there's information there on how to do all of the above. If you just want to quickly make a donation, there's donation links from a number of different payment processing platforms, as well as there's an investor advocacy form and a volunteer form. So yeah, anybody who's got the right talents to help out, we have positions that are open in regulatory affairs. We have positions that are open in marketing, in technology, and day-to-day operations. So we really do encourage people to come forward. And ultimately, we just want to be a forum which provides the voice to these investors. It is hard to get heard when you're a single voice, but having created this format, this forum, we encourage people to take charge of their own destiny, come forward, and don't be a passive sort of spectator in this very important life-changing decision that you have made. Come forward and be an active participant in this.
Yeah, I'll just wrap up and say, look, even though we do represent investors and most of our funding comes from EB5 investors themselves, we encourage other industry stakeholders to get involved with us too. Whether you're an attorney, investment issuer, regional center, developer, send us an email. Let's figure out ways to partner up together and do some good. We think the EB5 program could be changed for something positive. And even as once we take care of this reauthorization stuff, I think we have a big role to play in ensuring that existing and prospective investors can utilize this immigration by investment program for the greater good for everyone.
I was just going to ask one last question before we wrap up. If there were any members of the Senate that were listening to this, what would be the one message you would give them?
Sure. Well, the message that we want to give is that this is a program that Congress envisioned a long time ago, which was meant to bring jobs and economic development to this country at no cost to the U.S. taxpayer. We know that there's a lot of programmatic issues and a lot of technicalities that the program, is in obvious desperate need of fixing for the future. But we also believe that there's a real responsibility that Congress has to uphold the contract that it struck with existing investors. That's really the way that we look at it. We look at the idea of retroactive application of this lapse on existing investors as a common law issue, as a question of fairness, and really what we urge senators and congressmen to look at is uphold the contract that this country stuck with when these investments were induced through this program. The fact that there was a Congress authorized regional center program through which people could participate and bring these investments in return for a residency, that is a commitment that we look forward the Congress to be able to uphold on its end. What we would like to see is decoupling the fate of people who've signed up under existing provisions of the law to be retroactively disturbed through future updates. So that's one of the biggest messages I'd like to pass on. Other than that, looking towards the future, what we hope to see is that this program is seen as a job creating program. As you guys know, this is often bundled with the employment based categories, which sort of muddies the water a little bit. This is not a program that is taking jobs away. This is not a program that is giving jobs away to people who are outside. This is a program that creates jobs for existing American citizens and residents. So in the future, we do hope that this is an important strategic tool that the United States can use towards its infrastructure needs. And if we can reauthorize that program with some stability, with even some basic improvements to some of the programmatic issues, I think we can provide that stability with which this program can thrive.
And one last comment I would add to that is I know that various senators from different states are fighting about where the economic activity is happening. But at the end of the day, every one of these EB5 investors is coming to the United States and paying taxes and increasing the tax revenue in the United States in every state. So it's an economic benefit, even if they are not investing in your state. And I think that's important for the Senate members to understand. Thank you so much, Shawn and Ishaan, for taking the time and joining us. This has been wonderful, and we look forward to having you on the show hopefully soon.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, no, thanks for doing this. This was great.
Thank you both.
It even allowed us to sort of articulate why we're doing this, right? And this is really it's important when we come out and do these things that we're always sort of reminding ourselves what our guiding principles are, what our roots are, which it is quite easy in day-to-day conversations to get distracted by one or the other with so many different voices and stakeholders. But we're just here for the existing investor class.
Thank you again.
Thanks.
Thank you.